Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Down the Tee Tennis podcast. It has been quite a while since we last joined you after the Miami Open concluded, where Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Świątek were the champions. Since then, there has been a lot of action on the tour. Straight after Miami just starting on the men's side, you had the US Men's Clay Court Championship where Riley Opelka took the title. A bit of a strange one for me, but that green clay does well. It's not green clay actually. It is. It's red clay, but it's dyed green clay. It's more like the stuff that they play on in Charleston, and it plays more like a hard court, so maybe not that surprising. David Goffin won in Morocco. And then we moved on to Monte Carlo, which we will actually talk about quite in depth with Stefanos Tsitsipas taking the title there. After that, Carlos Alcaraz continued his great form in Barcelona, taking the title there. In the same week, Andrei Rublev beat Novak Djokovic in the final at the Serbia Open in Belgrade. Sebastian Baez, some encouraging results this season, and he's got his first title, I believe, that is, on the main tour at the Estoril Open in Portugal. The Bavarian International Tennis Championships in Munich, that was a bit of a mouthful for me. Holger Rune taking the final, the title in the final, which actually ended in retirement for Botic van de Zandschulp. So a bit of a disappointing final in the end, but Rune showed some good results this year, and you know, that'll be a big step for him. And finally, the last tournament, Carlos Alcaraz, once again, we've got to talk about him, haven't we? Because that run in Madrid was insane to the title. Meanwhile, on the WTA side of things, a lot of action here as well. We'll start with Charleston, where Belinda Bencic won on the green clay. And then I'm going to have to be excused for this pronunciation, but Tatiana Maria in the WTA 250 in Bogota, Colombia, taking the title there for some Billie Jean Cup action for the qualifying. But after that, Stuttgart, Iga Świątek, you know, another one we're going to have to talk about a lot again. In the 250 in Istanbul, Anastasia Potapova taking a title there. And finally, Madrid, the WTA 1000, Ons Jabeur taking the title at that one. So, as we say, a lot to cover. I think we'll start with the ATP, and we will start with Monte Carlo. I think we both mentioned Tsitsipas as a potential winner quite a lot in his preview of the tournament, and he came through in the end, a big result for Stefanos, I think.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And as you said, I think we both fancied him for the title there. I mean, no surprise. I think both looking at how well he played there last year, really, he had kind of a pretty dominant title run. And yeah, for me, I wasn't shocked to see him have a really strong result there, bouncing back. You know, he hadn't had a bad start to the year, but without winning, he hadn't actually won a title since the clay court season last year in Lyon, which was ahead of the French Open, and obviously reached the French Open final. So he'd had some solid results without really having a title. But I think back on what's definitely his favorite surface, it was a really impressive run to see him defend his title. I mean, not an easy thing to do, particularly a big tournament, Masters 1000 level, and his second Masters 1000 title. So he definitely loves it there in Monte Carlo. He's joined a really strong list of players there we've seen who've actually won back-to-back in Monte Carlo. Obviously, Nadal being the really big one, but along the likes of Thomas Muster, Bjorn Borg also on there. So it was really impressive to see for Tsitsipas. To see him really playing that well again, because I think he had been struggling a little bit with the elbow injury that had been a bit of a factor in him not having the greatest finish to last year, and started this year, as I mentioned, not bad as he'd started building it up. But and a good win against Davidovich Fokina in the final, who come on to in a second. But for Tsitsipas, I think the really, strong win over Zverev in the semifinals to win pretty convincingly in straight sets, and in the quarterfinals, which for me was an incredible match where he came from 4-love down in the final set, beat Diego Schwartzman. And game point, I think, in the fifth game. So he was really on the brink of going out there and turned it around, winning 6 games in a row. That was really impressive against a player of Schwartzman's quality on clay, who's also actually had a solid clay court season, I would say. And so fantastic for Tsitsipas. I think just highlighting himself again as a real contender for the French Open. And Davidovich Fokina definitely has got to be mentioned for his first ever ATP final, reaching the final in Monte Carlo, doing it at Masters 1000 level. And I think he's a player we saw last year on the clay, who's definitely capable on that surface as a young player who could improve even more, reaching the French Open quarterfinals. But for him, to take out Djokovic in the second round and backing it up, going all the way to the final, being the likes of Taylor Fritz and Dimitrov in the semis. That was a really strong run from Davidovich Fokina. So I think he's someone we've got to watch out for as well, going ahead to the French Open.
Yeah, you took some words out of my mouth there with Tsitsipas, because I was going to say followed it up with another strong run in Madrid, and we're going to get on to Madrid more later. And you actually, if you're Tsitsipas, I think maybe you're a little bit disappointed to lose to Zverev in that semi-final, considering the relative form of the two players, although Zverev did seem to find his tennis a little bit more over the last few weeks, and indeed in Madrid. And I was going to say, do you think, the return to form from Tsitsipas a little bit has brought him back into the minds as someone to maybe talk about for the French Open and in the slams again? And I think you pretty much did say that it may have outlined himself as a contender at the French Open. So taking the question right out of my mouth. So we'll move on. We'll stay with Monte Carlo for a bit. Was there any other players that you'd say had a great run, or maybe any players you weren't expecting to have a good run that went far in Monte Carlo?
Well, I would definitely give a mention to Grigor Dimitrov, who I think I touched on before. He lost a really good match in the semi-finals to Davidovich Fokina, which, you could look at it both ways, really. He was up 2-love, break point in the final set to go double break. I mean, you could say he was so close to the final and maybe let it slip away, which we have seen a few times from Dimitrov, but still, even to get to the semi-finals and play it at such a high level, I wasn't really expecting that. He has made the semi-finals in Monte Carlo before, so maybe it shouldn't have been too much of a shock, but I think he has had a couple of really good results there when he had in his Indian Wells run a couple of months ago as well. So he is having some good results at the big tournaments, Dimitrov, but don't necessarily think of clay as his best service. But that was an encouraging run for him, I would say. And so I would say, looking ahead, he's someone who could still be dangerous, I would say, in Rome and potentially Roland Garros.
Yeah, we'll move on now, and I think we'll touch on Barcelona. I was going to jump straight to Madrid and then come back and wrap up the clay season as a whole so far nicely. But Carlos Alcaraz in Barcelona, I mean, there's just no sign of him stopping. Is there? And for Barcelona was the start of his clay court season, I think, and he went and won the title there. It's a tournament where Rafa Nadal is almost synonymous with it. He plays there a lot, even though it's a 500, and I think the main court's named after Nadal nowadays. I mean, once again, I'm going to have to talk about Carlos Alcaraz and comparisons to the big three. He's not Nadal in his play style, but looking at I think the breakthrough, the way he's broken through at such a young age, he does seem to be mirroring Nadal's career in a lot of ways, doesn't he?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's true. I think there is pretty similar comparison there. I mean, obviously he did win in his first kind of big title on the hard courts in Miami, but even then, the first Masters 1000 final Nadal reached was actually in Miami, even though he didn't win it in 2005, where he lost to Federer in that 5-set final, and he used to play best of 5 still in the Masters 1000 finals. So does mirror in that sense. And obviously, I mean, great success on the clay already. We've seen him winning 2 500 titles on clay and the Masters 1000 in Madrid, which will obviously come on to. But yeah, in terms of the success he's had as a teenager, I mean, it only really does match Nadal in terms of players we've seen in the last 15 to 20 years. Obviously, Djokovic and Federer have had fantastic success, but not quite at such a young stage and such an early point in the development, I would say, that Alcaraz has had, which, as you mentioned, you can only really compare to Nadal. And to win a second 500 title there on the clay after Rio early in the year was just another extremely impressive run, and not only shown an incredible level, but as we mentioned before, we've talked about him on all the recent podcasts, rightly, because of what he's achieving, but it's the resilience as well and the physicality. He had to play the semi-final and the final on the same day. He came through a brutal match against Alex de Minaur in the semis, who had a fantastic run there. That he was someone who surprised me a bit, because I did think of de Minaur as someone who struggled a bit on clay, but he really put in a strong show, and then had 2 match points against Alcaraz. He saved them in the second set and came through and won in 3, and I think in about 3.5 hours. And then later in the day came back and routinely beat Pablo Carreño Busta, who'd had a straight sets semi-final against Schwartzman. So he was the fresher of the two players. So, I mean, to beat, a really solid player in Carreño Busta, who I think's improved on clay that convincingly after a really physically demanding match earlier in the day is just, another fantastic sign of, well, physically and mentally. I mean, you'd expect he's young, maybe he can recover well, but it is still impressive to come back from a tough match on the same day and win it. And also mentally to get over that. You mentioned the Nadal comparison. I think that's something we've seen from Nadal as well in the past. Coming back from brutal matches, which you think he's going to struggle from, and it's almost a mind over matter thing. And he's able to come and play a fantastic match in the next round. So, yeah, that was another extremely impressive display from Alcaraz in Barcelona.
And we'll stay on Alcaraz, actually. We'll skip all the way forward to the Madrid Open. We are skipping a lot of action. We will come back to wrap up the clay season as a whole so far nicely. I think the main thing to talk about with Carlos Alcaraz at Madrid is just how insane that run was. Quarter-final he comes through Nadal, semi-final he comes through Djokovic, and in the final he beats Alexander Zverev. Now, that run of 3 players to win a title, that's, it's only 1,000 points. That feels like it should be at least a 1,500 point run for me.
Absolutely, he was outstanding run. First player to beat Nadal and Djokovic in the same tournament on clay, and he did it back to back, as you mentioned. After his first ever win over Nadal, his idol, who he'd lost his first 2 meetings with, to then, you see players sometimes have these big wins against the big 3, and then they have a bit of a letdown in the next round, and he's got to go again and play another one of the big 3 in the semis, and it's a 3-hour, 35-minute epic, which absolutely unbelievable match against Djokovic, who extremely high level from both of them. Nadal, you could say, probably wasn't at his very best in the quarterfinals. He still did some good things at times, but Alcaraz, obviously, he had to overcome the injury though in that match, which he got in the second set. So impressive in that sense, and still to beat Nadal on a clay court in any circumstances, even if he's just coming back from the injury, was a great win. But then, as I mentioned, against a really good version of Djokovic, I thought in that semi-final, he's built some form from not starting too well in Monte Carlo, then having that decent run to the final in Belgrade, and coming in here, I thought Djokovic played really well in that match in most departments, but Alcaraz, was just an unbelievable effort to come from a set down as well. All 3 sets were tie. You would have thought, losing a tight first set and a tie break might be tough for him. He came back and he wins the second set 7-5. He gets over the disappointment of not taking a match point. Then in the third set, goes into a tie break and he wins it. A tight tie break against possibly the most clutch player, you'd say, in terms of tight moments mentally, Djokovic. So to do that, go through the final, as you mentioned, Zverev couldn't have really been a much tougher final opponent than given Zverev's record in Madrid. winning the title twice. He seems to love it in Madrid. He said it's his favorite tournament after the final, and he was the defending champions. And to beat him for only losing 4 games, a player with Zverev's serve in conditions that actually are good for serving for a clay court tournament. Yeah, just so amazing what he's achieved there. And again, has a perfect record in finals. He hasn't lost any of his finals at ATP level. So, an outstanding start of the clay season. And I think we touched on, I don't know if we touched on before, he did lose the quarter in Monte Carlo in his opening match. That was coming off the back of the Miami Open, not long after it. But he's then, so you wondered, and I think he'd said as well that he actually prefers hard courts to clay. But I think we've seen, even if there's any doubts about that in Monte Carlo, he's gone and won the next 2 tournaments. So yeah, it's staggering what he's already doing. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing him at Roland Garros.
Yeah, I'd completely forgot about that in Monte Carlo. In fact, I said that his clay season started in Barcelona. I do apologise for that. But coming on to one of the things you said there that just completely rings true for me, that win over Djokovic. If you'd have told me the set score beforehand, 6-7, 7-5, 7-6, and it's a match involving Djokovic, that's a match that Djokovic has won for me, because those tight sets, where it comes down to just a couple of points and who turns up in the big moments, they're the matches that Djokovic wins. To do that against Djokovic is just insane for me. And it's why I think I still see, well, I don't hear people, I see people because I'm reading, but on social media and stuff, saying, can we just not hype this kid up too much? There's so many kids that show potential at a young age and never make it. But this talent is genuinely generational talent. We're past that point now. We're past the point of, well, you know, he could just be a flash in the pan. He's clearly not. His game's ridiculous. You know, he's got pretty much everything. I think you've mentioned before maybe a bit of improvement on the serve, and that's one of the areas where he could maybe go forward, but it's also one of the easiest areas to improve. His forehand's ridiculous. His drop shot is fantastic. His movement is great. His backhand, he's got plenty on his backhand side as well. He's got everything, and I don't think there's any risk of jinxing his career from here. He's going to win a hell of a lot. I'm not saying he's going to break records, but he's going to win a hell of a lot. He's going to have a fantastic career. He's already having a fantastic career. Looking at people that have had a fantastic career, we'll come on to Nadal and Djokovic. Djokovic has played a fair bit during the clay season. He's had some encouraging results. He's not got a title to show for it, but a final, a semi-final. I think match practice is important, so going deep in general is just important for him. Rafa Nadal, you know, coming back in Madrid, made the quarterfinal. I think he had to come through 2 matches to get into the quarterfinal. Goes out to Alcaraz in 3 sets. Who do you think will be happier with the performance in Madrid out of those two?
Yeah, I think Djokovic might be slightly happier, but I don't think either of them will be too disappointed. Obviously, I think Djokovic, I think he said after the match, and as he would be, disappointed to lose such a great match like that, such a close one where he was so close to the final. I think he knows he would have had a good chance of winning it, but I think to play so well against an incredible player in Alcaraz, who is the informed player on the tour, he's got so many matches and wins under his belt in recent months. Djokovic doesn't quite have that, so but still, you know, play that well against him and almost come away with a win and to reach the semi-finals. I think he'll be really pleased with that off the back of the final in Belgrade. I think he's looking in pretty good shape heading into Rome, which is his favorite clay court event, and there's also Nadal's favorite clay court event, well, after Monte Carlo. But I think in terms of all the finals he's been in as well, they've both got an incredible record in Rome. And Nadal, I don't think it's, yeah, as you said, two wins and then a loss in the quarterfinals. I don't think he'll be too disappointed with his that for a first tournament since Indian Wells, his first tournament on the clay. Obviously would have loved to beat Alcaraz, I'm sure, and to get that match with Djokovic kind of ahead of the French Open. But I think a pretty solid showing. It's not a shock result. We haven't seen Nadal win Madrid since 2017. It is his least favorite of the clay events with the altitude and the slightly quicker conditions. So I don't think he'll be too concerned, and I'll expect to see a stronger run from him in Rome. And we have seen him in 2020 only going to the French Open with Rome under his belt, and he lost in the quarterfinals there, and then went on and won the French Open without dropping a set. It was one of his greatest title runs ever. So I think we've seen both with Nadal, either having a full clay court season or a shortened one. He still tends to find a way to be at his best for Roland Garros and be very difficult to beat if he's healthy.
Coming on to more in Madrid then, is there just anyone we haven't touched on so far that you feel we need to talk about?
Well, yeah, I'd mention Zverev getting to the final was a good run. I would say he had a fairly kind draw, possibly up until Tsitsipas in the semis, but that was a really good win from him. I'll definitely give him credit for that after losing to him pretty convincingly in the Monte Carlo semis, as we mentioned earlier. And yeah, as I touched on, he does seem to love playing in Madrid, but then it was a really disappointing performance from him in the final. I think it has to be said, and possibly, as we're going to touch on, the scheduling was tough with that semi-final. The second one starting pretty late and finishing really late. I think that does have some effect, and it can be taken into account. But I think it was still a really flat and kind of dejected performance once things started going wrong. And obviously, you've got to give Alcaraz a lot of credit for that because he was unbelievably good. But I do think it was a really disappointing performance from Zverev, particularly the way he almost seemed to give up in the second set. And as I said, I don't want to be too harsh, given, he probably didn't get to bed until very late. He was maybe a little bit flat, but I thought maybe a slightly disappointing end, but it was a good run for him to add that to his semi-final in Monte Carlo. But in between there, he did have he had a poor loss really in Munich to Rune, who it was a great run for him to the title, but still without a title this year, Zverev. So the results haven't been that bad in terms of runs and tournaments, but he is still struggling, I would say, for his best tennis.
Yeah. With that in mind, Zverev will be up there because he's up there in the rankings. He'll be up there with the favourites for the French Open. When we come to predicting the French Open in a few weeks' time, do you think he'll enter your thoughts too much?
I'd say probably not in terms of winning the title, unless we see something else in Rome, which, I mean, he has won before, 2017, and reached the final the following year. So he does have a good record at that tournament. And as I said, he's maybe not miles away because he has been going deep in some of these tournaments. He does enjoy it on the clay. So with a strong Rome, there's possibility, but I would say to win the title, I would have him probably at fifth favorite at the moment behind Nadal, Djokovic, Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, probably in that order. Well, over Alcaraz, Djokovic, I'd say it's hard to say where Alcaraz is right now, but he's maybe closer than that. But yeah, I would have him maybe behind that group at the moment, but he's a player I would expect to go deep in the tournament, but probably not win it at the moment.
So we'll move on to the rest of the clay court season, which, we've got a lot of 250s in there that we haven't really covered. Opelka on the red-green clay, David Goffin, Andrei Rublev, Sebastian Baez, and Holger Rune, your title winners. So just in general, who's impressed you so far in the clay court season that we haven't maybe touched on from the Masters events and Barcelona?
Yeah, I would say from what I watched the most was probably Belgrade from that group of tournaments. So I would say Rublev played really well from what I watched him there, beating Fognini really convincingly in the semi-finals. He'd actually been playing quite well, and then obviously in a really good final against Djokovic up until maybe the third set where Djokovic kind of collapsed physically, a bit like he did in Monte Carlo, but seems to put that behind him. But still, I'd give Rublev a lot of credit for how well he played in that match to win the first set, I think 6-2, and then narrowly lost the second one in a tiebreak, which I think was probably more due with Djokovic really raising his level with the crowd behind him there, pushed it to a decider, but just didn't quite have anything left. So Rublev did well to finish that off pretty ruthlessly, and that was a good title for Rublev on the clay. I think he followed up with a decent quarter-final run in Madrid, where he was actually not far away from beating Tsitsipas. So I would say encouraging for Rublev there. He's someone, I would say, going ahead of the French Open is another player who could have a solid run. And also Rune, as we just touched on, to get his first title, as you mentioned, it was a shame in the final for Van de Zandschulp having to retire, who's also playing some great tennis there. But Rune to knock Zverev out really convincingly, like his home tournament, to go on and take his first title, is definitely someone I had on the radar as one of the more talented teenage players. I think clay is his favorite surface, so he's definitely someone to watch out for. I'm looking forward to seeing how he does at the French Open, and also moving forward, because he's definitely someone with a lot of talent.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to someone else, another Scandinavian, really, Casper Ruud, someone who I expected us to be talking about a lot. In fact, I think after Miami, I said that I'd still have him above Carlos Alcaraz in the betting odds for the French Open, just because of how well he did on clay last year. And clay has always been his best surface, but he had a great run on hard courts, and I thought that stands him in great stead for the clay season. He hasn't really got going properly, has he, this year?
Oh, no, I'm surprised, and I agree with you. I'd have had him in the mix. I would have said maybe ahead of Zverev, and not far off that top four that I'd mentioned, just because of the fantastic results we've seen him have on clay. Obviously winning a lot of 250 titles, but also he's reached the semi-finals of all three of the Masters 1000 events on clay last year and 2020. So yeah, I'm surprised he's had a poor start. Still a couple of events to turn around, heading into Roland Garros, possibly with Rome, and then I would think he's playing Geneva again, where he won the title last year. But no, I am surprised by Ruud. I don't know if there's a slight physical problem, or that whether there's anything else going on, because I really did see him as someone who's going to have some consistent results here and possibly even pick up a big title, or maybe the 500 in Barcelona. I wouldn't have been surprised to see him do that or reach a Masters final, something like that. So he's had a couple of early exits, losing to Dimitrov in Monte Carlo. It wasn't a bad loss, but then losing to Carreño Busta, he had match points in Barcelona. I think in the quarterfinals, I think that's one he'll be really disappointed with, because it was a great opportunity there to go and reach the final, maybe win it. Same in Madrid, losing his first match to Lajovic was a bit disappointing. So I'm expecting him to bounce back at some stage. I think he's too good a player not to, as long as there isn't something else going on, as I said. But I would say in Rome, if not Rome, the Geneva ahead of the French Open, I'm expecting to see him get some wins and still be a player who could be tough to beat at the French. But yeah, I am surprised.
So someone we expected to see a lot more of during the clay season. I want to come on briefly to someone who we didn't expect to see at all during the clay season. Andy Murray said he was going to skip the clay. He takes a wild card in Madrid, which proved controversial for some reason. I don't think it's really that controversial. Gets a big win over Dominic Thiem. Team might come on to him a little bit because he really can't buy a win at the moment, and then beats Denis Shapovalov as well to set up a mouth-watering third round with Novak Djokovic. I so wanted that match, but apparently food poisoning has kept Murray out of it, and it was such a shame, wasn't it? Because Murray did actually look like he'd made a big step forward in Madrid, didn't he?
Yeah, oh yeah, it was such a shame. I was really looking forward to seeing that match because I think those two hadn't played since 2017. So I was really looking forward to seeing that again. Love to see any matches between the big four are fantastic to see, and as I said, that's a matchup we haven't seen in a while. Love to see those two play each other. So it was a shame he didn't get the reward for the two fantastic wins he had in the first two rounds against Thiem and Shapovalov, where I thought he played really well. I'd say that they were maybe slightly erratic performances from Thiem and Shapovalov, but still, two really strong players there on clay, as you say. Didn't expect to see Murray on clay. And yeah, I was really impressed with the level he brought, and particularly to see off Shapo, I would say, in that third set in the second round. So great to see him back, and also without going into too much of a rant on the wild cards. I don't know what more you can do than that to justify a wild card there, beating former Madrid finalist and Shapo, who I think had reached the semis, and two players who've been in the top 10, top 5 in Thiem's case, and a Grand Slam winner, even if he's not at his best. Why would tournament directors not want to have Murray in the event? I don't quite understand the criticism of Murray getting wild cards. But anyway, as I said, I'm not going to keep going about that for a while, but I think I'm looking forward to seeing him. It's a shame we're not going to see him in Rome, where there was a possibility he was going to play, but I think really good signs. Just the level he produced to get a few matches under his belt there going into the grass season. I think already seen maybe some signs of him working with Lendl being a positive move.
Yeah, I thought it might have been wishful thinking, but we might actually end up seeing him at Roland Garros after his encouraging performance in Madrid. But I think having only played Madrid, not playing Rome, I'm not sure we will see him at the French Open. I think he might just decide to take the time off and be physically ready for the grass court season. After that match with Dominic Thiem at the net, there was a lovely exchange where he said, it takes time, but it'll come. It's great to see you back. Dominic Thiem is really struggling to find a win at the moment. As we're recording, the first day of play at Rome has just finished up, and Dominic Thiem has gone out again, but an encouraging performance by all accounts against Fabio Fognini.
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that you see extreme arguments all the time online, and people just jump straight to he's finished, he can't get a win. But like Murray said, it's going to take time, isn't it, for Dominic Thiem? But he'll get somewhere, won't he, in the end?
Yeah, I think so. Particularly coming back off a wrist injury, it can be a really difficult injury, particularly in the early stages to come back from. And we've seen it with Del Potro. It did take him a bit of time, even after the multiple surgeries he had with the wrist injury. Well, yeah, on both wrists. It wasn't easy for him to come back either time, and he was a little bit weaker in the first few months, but he did get there. And I think it was in 2016, which was in his second wrist comeback. He achieved some of his best career moments by the end of that season. So I think there's just got to be a bit of patience, even though it is disappointing to see someone of Thiem's stature not been able to get a win yet on his favorite service. But I'm sure, as you said, an encouraging performance today. I thought that it's not as if it's been getting worse or it's just been staying the same. I thought that was his best match he's played today, probably against Fognini, who's a great clay court player. He had the home crowd behind him, and he nearly did nick that second set. Thiem from what I saw, he was doing a lot of things right. I think his forehand, which has kind of been the problem, I think, since the comeback, which has been probably affected by the wrist injury, did look better in this match from what I'd seen, certainly in the match against Murray, even just last week. So I think that's a positive sign, particularly towards the end of the match. He was hitting that a bit better, which obviously he needs that back. He's got many big weapons, but that's his biggest one. So hopefully, if he can get the confidence back in that forehand, we'll see Thiem back hopefully by the French Open. And he's probably going to play another tournament, I would assume, in between before the French, and then but it might be later in the year before we see him really the confidence back. But I'm looking forward to it because I think it'll get there.
Anyone who's a somewhat regular listener will know that I'm personally a massive Dominic Thiem fan. So obviously I'm hoping that he'll get there. And like Ewan said, I really do think he will. Like Murray said, I think it is just one of those things. It'll take time. He's had a long time off. He's still at an age where, he's far from being washed up, and he's still got time in him to come back, and his game's too good. That's what it comes down to for me. His talent with a tennis racket is just too much for him to be finished. I think that's just an extreme view that people take when they just look at the results, but there has been some encouraging signs. The performances have been getting better and better bit by bit, and he will get there for me. But I think we have talked about the men enough. I mean, there's more we could have talked about, to be honest, but we have got to move on to the WTA now. I think the good thing here, I suppose, is that there's a bit less for us to cover. The only Masters event actually has been Madrid, where Ons Jabeur takes the title. How impressed were you with her over the last week?
Yeah, really, really impressed from what I saw, which was mainly the last stages of the tournament. But I thought it was fantastic to see her get to win a big title, which was only a second WTA title. The first one had been a 250 event on the grass in Birmingham, I think it was. So I was really pleased to see her get a big title, because she has been a fantastic player and a fantastic talent for quite some time, and a top 10 player now. He'd been up to 7 in the world last year. She's got back there now after this win, a career high. So it was good to see her get the rewards for pretty consistent, strong results without really going on to lift a big title. I would say similar to Maria Sakkari in that sense. There's players who've really been contenders, who've been having strong results, have really got all the tools, I think, to have big wins, but just hasn't quite happened for them yet. But with Jabeur, she's made the breakthrough here. So pleased for her. And I mean, a great win over Jessica Pegula in the final. It was also her biggest final of her career. Her first WTA 1000 event final. So it was good to see both those players really having breakthrough tournaments. And I mean, Jabeur is just a player with fantastic power and variety, and definitely well suited to the clay with the drop shots she can use, but also as I said, the power to hit through the court. A fantastic slice, and does well with the kick serve. So she's definitely someone who she's well suited to the clay, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing how she can do at the French, where I think she has made the quarterfinals before, but you never know. I mean, she could have a strong run there. I think she's this really, after Świątek, I think there's a lot of players in a group who you would say are kind of on the next tier down, who could all really have a good run at the semis, maybe the final. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But yeah, I mean, a really good run at the title, being Paolini, Bencic, Halep, which, I mean, that was a fantastic win in the quarterfinals over Halep, who'd beaten Badosa convincingly earlier in the tournament, and also Alexandra in the semi-finals, who'd had a great run there as a qualifier. So yeah, really impressed with Jabeur.
Well, just before we move on from Jabeur then, I noticed you mentioned a lot of players who you think can make a strong run, maybe to the semi-final or final. I think Świątek's clearly, obviously, the favourite for the French Open, considering her recent form. Knowing how unpredictable the WTA can be, and knowing that Jabeur is one of those players that, she maybe just needed that breakthrough to get quite a big title to her name, and that would really be a big next step. Does she come into your thinking at all for the title? Do you think she could do it? Is it at least an outside chance for you?
Yeah, I think an outside chance definitely can't be ruled out, because even with the dominance we've seen from Świątek on the tour in recent months, I mean, she still has just one Grand Slam title under her belt. I'm saying just one, that's not to downplay that, but it's not. She hasn't got to a stage yet where she very well may do, where she's won 4 or 5 slams and she is a dominant player. But until she wins that second or third slam, I think it's still possibly a bit more open. She's, I suppose, in a sense, got a lot of pressure on her going into the French Open because of the fantastic run she's on, having already won the French before. And I think, and the aura she's rightly probably built up, but I think she has separated herself as the favorite, as you really said. I don't think there's a big gap probably between first and who you'd put as second. I think second, there's not really a clear one right now who you'd fit into that slot. So yeah, I think Jabeur is definitely in the conversation to potentially do it. I mean, she has beaten Świątek at Wimbledon, I believe, last year. So yeah, it's possible. And as you say, with the confidence she takes from getting a big title, that could make all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a long time since we've seen Świątek lose for me, and that's why I really just don't see her losing. But I think it is a key point. She is still only on one slam title, and although that's not bad for her age to even have a slam title, she's not unbeatable. She has still probably got a few hurdles to overcome. She hasn't got that champion aura that Serena Williams, I was looking at the men's that Nadal, Djokovic have yet. So I think we're heading towards a really interesting French Open for the women, where it's hard. We've got a clear favourite. We'd have to say Świątek's a favourite based on just, like I say, it's a long time since it feels like we've seen her lose. But we've got a lot of players that couldn't really mount a serious challenge, and on those, is there anyone else whose results so far this clay court season you feel could maybe be fancying a run towards the title or the final, at least, at the French?
Yeah, well, I was encouraged by Halep, who I touched on, just reaching the quarterfinals in Madrid. Obviously, she's being fairly convincingly by Jabeur in that match, but as I said, beating Badosa, I think, in the second round, 6-3, 6-1. I mean, that was a fantastic win against Badosa, who's the second seed there, playing a home tournament. She reached the semi-finals in Madrid last year as well. So I think that, on the back of Halep's strong run in Indian Wells, which was a previous tournament. Obviously, she's only played one on the clay so far, but I think we've seen some strong results there from her. And as I think we touched on the last podcast, working with Parik Mouratoglou now could be a good partnership for her. I think we both said, I think he's a good coach. So yeah, I think Halep, obviously a former French Open winner and a 2-time finalist, he's got to be right in the mix there, I would say, based on what we've seen on the clay season, because we did see a few of the other higher seeds lose early in Madrid.
Yeah. On the clay so far, I'm trying to look at other big stories from the WTA. Aside from Madrid, we've had 2 500 tournaments. Charleston, which once again, that's green clay, plays weird. It plays somewhere in between a hard court and a clay court. Amanda Anisimova made the semis there. She also made the quarters in Madrid. Someone who probably had her first big breakthrough actually on the clay in the French Open in 2019, I want to say. Was it the semi-final she made?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've waited long for her to really build on that breakthrough. And there has been so many things that have gone on in between, injuries. Her father sadly died. I think that might be in 2019 or 2020, and changes of coaches and stuff like that. But do you feel like she's ready, maybe, or she's shown signs at least of kicking on?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right to highlight Anisimova, as you mentioned. There's a couple of really good runs there, and past French Open results definitely show that. I think she enjoys it on the clay, and beating Sabalenka also in Madrid was a good win. So she is capable of having those big upsets against the top players, of even, well, at the Australian Open on a different service. We saw her beat Naomi Osaka and have an encouraging run there. So I think she's definitely heading back in the right direction, Anisimova, and obviously still so young, so much talent. You see the ball striking ability she's got. I think it's no surprise she's had some really good results on clay. So I'm really looking forward to see how she does it. Well, firstly in Rome, but then definitely at Roland Garros, because I think, yeah, she's definitely heading back in the direction where she could be a player going really deep in these big tournaments.
Coming on to another young player and a British one, Emma Raducanu. Some positive signs for her on the clay as well. And I think it's funny because it's being outlined that she has very little experience actually on the clay. I'm sure she'll have played plenty on the clay in juniors, but not as much because in general, the competitive tennis system from the high levels in the UK to even right down to amateurs, there's not really much on clay. There's not many clubs that have clay courts over here. And I think she was asked why she was doing so well on clay despite not playing much on it in the past, and she said something like, "I'm just out here vibing." So to say that she's just playing on vibes at the moment, some good results so far.
Yeah, really good, really encouraging start to her career on clay, I would say. The quarterfinals in Stuttgart was really good. She had a couple of good wins there and actually played really well against Świątek. I thought in that match, which I think was 6-4, 6-4, but it was arguably even closer than the scoreline looked. I mean, I think she had chances in the second set to take it even closer. So I mean, to play against the player who we've said has been on this incredible run, 23 match wins in a row now. She was arguably one of the players who's been closer to her there. And as you say, with just such limited experience on clay, I think to have a performance like that against Świątek particularly was impressive for me. But then also she got a win in the Billie Jean King Cup, which when she was making a debut on the surface against the Czech Republic for Great Britain, and then she's gone on to Madrid and got a couple more wins there where she played really well from what I watched. In the end, lost to Kalinina, who actually I thought played really well in that match. It was a tight 3-setter, could have really gone either way, but I'm encouraged with what I've seen so far from Raducanu. So, and I would have thought a game isn't as well suited to clay as the quicker surfaces, but I think she's already shown she can be a player who can have success in all surfaces. Obviously, we've already seen grass courts and hard courts. So, yeah, that's exciting to see moving ahead for the rest of her career, but also at the French Open to see if she could have a little run there.
Obviously, the surfaces make a massive difference, but when you've got someone like Raducanu who hasn't played much on clay in the past, just kind of naturally take to the surface. And it's not like she's done outstanding things, but she's won tennis matches on clay. Just makes me think the most effective thing is just being a good tennis player. If you're a good tennis player, you can play on anything. Like, yeah, there is specialities, there is differences, but if you can hit the ball well, you can hit the ball well. It's just, that's all it comes down to. But moving on from that, I think the last talking point I can really think of from the WTA, well, the last main one to cover at least, because like I say, we are skipping through things quite quickly. Bianca Andreescu coming back from injury. It's been a long road back. Someone who had crazy potential at such a young age, and she still is at a very young age. How great is it to see her back and to have some decent results as well?
Yeah, fantastic to see her back. It's definitely one of my favorite players to watch. And it has been a shame that we just haven't seen too much of her since a great 2019 season where obviously she won the US Open. And obviously she'd missed the whole of 2020 and didn't play too much last year either. She dealt with a lot of injuries and I think some mental health issues as well. But I think she's taking some time away now. She seems to be in a better place, and it's great to see her back. I mean, I think she's really one of the most talented young players on the WTA tour. There's a real good group, but she's right in there, and I think she's someone who could be, as well as on hard courts, as we've obviously seen on clay. I think a game that can definitely do well on clay with the variety, the power, the heavy forehand, the spin, and as you mentioned, a couple of good wins in Madrid before she lost to Pegula, who, as it turns out, definitely wasn't a bad loss. Pegula went on and reached the final, played some fantastic tennis. So yeah, great to see Andreescu back, and hopefully she can just get plenty of matches under her belt and actually compete regularly, because that's just what she needs, really. We haven't seen it since 2019.
For me, it messes with my head. Players like Andreescu, and it feels like we first were introduced to ages ago, and she's still only 21 years old. Anisimova still only 20 years old. Like, these people have really good results at a young age. I mean, Świątek as well, only 20 years old. It feels like these people should be older by now. It's really messed with my head a little bit that 21 years old, she's still got so much time ahead of her in tennis. I mean, some players don't even really make a great breakthrough until the late 20s. So encouraging to see her back, and just hope it continues. Hope she stays fit. I hope she stays well, and really kicks on. Moving on now, and we'll move on to his little news section before we start to look a bit more at Rome. The biggest news to happen since we last spoke was the WTA, Wimbledon, announcing that Russian players will be banned from competing at this year's championships, and it's a really extreme move. It's a move that it's brought about really mixed reactions. I feel like it's brought about mixed reactions from tennis fans and non-tennis fans, from people of different political sides of the spectrum. Obviously, the root of the issue is the ongoing invasion of Ukraine, which nobody can justify. With that in mind, do you feel the punishment to individual Russian tennis players was the right step from the All England Lawn Tennis Club?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it's a difficult one, and I do respect everyone's view on this, but my personal view is I think it is unfair on the players, and I completely understand. I've listened to various viewpoints, arguments, why the sanctions are arguably necessary, and that every sanction that can be imposed possible should be taken. But for me personally, I just don't see what impact this is likely to have on on stopping the Russian aggression, stopping individual athletes in a sport like tennis from playing one tournament, albeit the most prestigious tennis tournament. I just don't really see what impact this will have. The sanctions that have already been imposed haven't really had. So for me, I think it is unfair on the players from Russia and Belarus, who I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that they support what's going on. If that did come to light, then maybe on individual cases that could be looked at, but I don't think there's certainly some players who've spoken out against it and have shared messages of peace. So yeah, for me personally, I don't support the decision.
I think for me, as you mentioned, the sanctions that have already been imposed, much stronger sanctions, really strong economic sanctions that have decimated the value of the ruble, that have had a huge impact on the Russian economy. I mean, they're much stronger than anything Wimbledon or the LTA can do, and they've had no effect. We're dealing, and I'll make no bones about it, just an absolute madman here, someone who's, I don't think he's right. I think he comes from a ridiculous place, with his viewpoint, with his mentality. It's insane, really. I can't believe that people like this still hold power in the era that we're living in. But when you look at people like, Andrei Rublev, who quite quickly was one of the first prominent Russian people to speak out against the war, and to see him punished and not able to play Wimbledon because the leader of his country just continues on this ridiculous path that he's on, it seems unfair to me. Even players that haven't put out as strong as an anti-war message, that I think, that they have skirted around the issue, because we don't know whether they've got family back in Russia that can't get out of Russia. I know the argument's being made, I've had plenty of time to move family out of Russia. I don't think it is as simple right now as I want to leave Russia, I'll get out of Russia. So, I'm not sure we can read anything into that. They may have people back home whose lives we're not willing to risk over stating clearly they don't support the war, that maybe have skirted around the issue a bit more. But I don't think there's probably any prominent Russian tennis player right now that, if I had to guess, obviously I don't know their own viewpoint, but I don't think any of them probably support it. And it does seem a really strong action to take to punish these individual people that, in my view, have nothing to do with what's going on in Ukraine right now. But once again, I know whatever viewpoint you're going to have on this, it's going to be controversial, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems hard to move on from something like that. it seems hard to bring it back now to match scheduling. We've had some controversy around this recently. The schedules of individual matches, I think there was a few in Madrid that brought up a little bit of controversy, and I think the fact that the Madrid going straight from Madrid into Rome, I think it's forced Carlos Alcaraz out of action as it this week, and I think that's brought up some people thinking, should there be a bigger gap between these tournaments? Coming on to that, do you think there's room for work on the ATP tour and WTA tour, obviously, on match scheduling and tournament scheduling at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I personally do think it's a problem, Madrid and Rome being in back-to-back weeks, having, you know, two big events like that, 1,000 events. I think to have them as, you know, I know with Indian Wells and Miami, it's a little bit different because you've got them kind of played over the 10 days. Then maybe, yeah, I just don't think you can have them, you know, as 7-day events in back-to-back weeks. I think it is a lot to ask of the players who go deep and play the finals and the semi-finals on Saturday and Sunday to then go the next week and play another big event, playing the first round match a few days later. I would like to see at least a week in between Madrid and Rome if that can be done scheduling wise. I don't really see why Madrid couldn't be played a little bit earlier. Maybe Madrid held after the week where Barcelona and Stuttgart was, and then maybe have Estoril and Munich in between Madrid and Rome. I think you've got to try and separate the biggest events as much as possible. So that's definitely something I'd like to see, because it is really unfortunate that we're not going to be able to see Alcaraz again in Rome. And look, you might have pulled out of Rome anyway if he'd won Madrid and it had been a week earlier, but I think there's a much greater chance we would have seen him in there. So it does, in a way, dilute the tournament a little bit, that we don't get to see the narrative continue of Alcaraz, who's just had this fantastic run, beating Nadal and Djokovic, potentially could then challenge for them in the title again in Rome and play one of them again. So yeah, it is a shame in that sense. Something I would maybe like to see change. And just on the scheduling in Madrid, I think, yeah, it isn't ideal for either the women's final or the second men's semi-final, the way that it's currently scheduled on that Saturday. I think if the women's final is going to be on the same day as the two semi-finals, I think it would be much better if that was played first and then the two semi-finals afterwards, and maybe if play just started earlier in general, because I think, yeah, it wasn't ideal for Jabeur and Pegula in that final, and then for Tsitsipas and Zverev in the men's semi, which started and finished really late. I think that did have, as I mentioned before, some impact on Zverev's performance in the final. So I think that's probably something which needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the issue of tournament scheduling and maybe the tour in generally, I just want to add the little note of extend the grass court season. I don't know if anyone at the ITF, the ATP, the WTA is watching this. Extend the grass court season. We won't get into that. That could actually be the basis of a whole different video, a whole special about extending the grass court season, but we won't get into that now. What we will get into, we'll finally get us teeth into the Italian Open in Rome. Always a fantastic tournament. One that Nadal loves. Obviously, Nadal loves every clay tournament. Looking at the draw, if we to get the draw up, I'm going to have to share my screen. This is starting to feel like an online lecture, which, I mean, I'm all too familiar with the whole taking time to share the screen thing. Hopefully that's there now. Although we are on section 2 rather than section 1. Looking at the draw, looking at that first section, Djokovic jumps out immediately. Your other seed that goes straight through to the second round is Felix Auger-Aliassime. I mean, we haven't really talked about him this episode, to be honest. I think he got a quarter final, didn't he? But he hasn't done too much. Other players in there, Wawrinka's in there. Davidovich Fokina did make it through his first round. Looking at that, Ewan, what are your thoughts? Who's coming through that?
Yeah, I think Djokovic looks good to get to the quarters there. Just to go through quickly, I think Karatsev, not necessarily an easy one, but he's been pretty badly out of form actually since the Australian Open. Did have a good win there, as you can see, against Harris. I think he saved match points. That could be a confidence booster, but even though he's been Djokovic before, now I think Djokovic to come through the quarters. Obviously, Wawrinka in there, it was great to see him get a win today. Obviously, Djokovic, Wawrinka is always an interesting one, so it'd be nice to see that in the third round. But yeah, I can see Djokovic through to the quarters, and I would actually go with Davidovich Fokina to join him there. I would have said that before his first round match, not just the next. He's already through. But yeah, as you mentioned with Auger-Aliassime, I don't think it was a decent quarterfinal in Madrid, but Madrid conditions a little bit different. Quarterfinals in Barcelona as well, but I'm still not convinced clay. He's quite there yet on clay. Working with Tony Nadal definitely could be something which pays off on clay longer term. But I'll probably go Davidovich Fokina just to get through there. Obviously Schwartzman, Kekmanovic as well. I mean, it's a strong section.
I think was it Rio the first 500 final that Auger-Aliassime made when he made his big breakthrough, and I thought, well, he's set up to be an excellent clay court player, but like you say, he hasn't really developed that great on clay so far, but I think he will get there. Moving on to section 2 now, we've got Rafa, obviously, he jumps out immediately. Once again, Ruud is your other seed immediately through to the second round. The rest, but there's a second round already decided here between Basilashvili and Denis Shapovalov. Brooks being there on his own at the moment as we await other results. So who's coming through this one? I think there's a clear favourite, isn't there?
Yeah, I'll definitely go with Nadal, Ruud quarterfinal, and I didn't mention on the top, I would go with Djokovic to beat Davidovich Fokina in that first one, but I'll go with Nadal and Ruud to get there and Nadal to win. I just think Nadal, it's not a bad draw there, really. Shapovalov dangerous. He actually did have match points against Rafa when they played in Rome last year, but I would back Nadal to win that one. This time Shapo is not in good form. Well, he's only played Madrid, I think, since the Sunshine Double, so he's not got much many clinical matches under his belt. And then I'll go with Ruud to bounce back from his slightly up and down run. I mean, he's not gone easy on there. And Van der Zandschulp, who beat him at the US Open last year, and has had some good results on clay. You've also got Goffin in there. You got the title in Marrakesh. He's actually playing some better tennis now, Goffin, and Hurkacz, who's improved on clay this year. But yeah, I think Ruud.
Yeah. So moving now into the bottom half, section 3, Tsitsipas is your top seed in section 3, and then you've also got Rublev, who was straight through to the second round on seeding. Carreño Busta versus Khachanov is already decided. Fognini's in there on his own at the moment. So looking at this, once again the same question: who's coming through this section?
Yeah, I'll go with Tsitsipas to beat Sinner in the quarterfinals of this one. I think pretty confident with Tsitsipas. I mean, he's had a good clay season so far, really. Obviously, the one title, then his 2 losses have been Alcaraz and Zverev in Barcelona and Madrid. So I think a good run there again. He's got a good record at all the clay events. And Sinner, I think his home event didn't seem to have a great run in Madrid, but I think prefer the conditions here in Rome, a bit more similar to Monte Carlo, where he had a good run. And it doesn't have an easy draw there in Martinez and then Fognini in the second round. But I'll back Sinner just to get through then, and Rublev obviously as well in the third round. But his home event, I think we could see Sinner have a good run here and beat Rublev again, possibly there as he did in Monte Carlo, and Tsitsipas to come through to the semis.
On the final section 4. Once again, Zverev straight through on seeding. We've got a lucky loser straight through on seeding as well, Emil Ruusuvuori. So you'll be happy with that one. Alongside Ruusuvuori's Garan in that match, we've got Dimino versus Tommy Paul already decided. Marin Cilic in there on his own at the moment. I think the draw's fallen quite nicely for Zverev here, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good draw for Zverev, and that's where Alcaraz would have been, where Ruusuvuori is there, the lucky loser. So I think he'll definitely be happy with that draw, particularly with Alcaraz not being there. So I think this is, for me, a pretty clear one with Zverev to get through to the semis, and I'd probably go with Cam Norrie to be the player he meets in the quarterfinals. There, that it's not the strongest section, that top mini section where Alcaraz would have been. You've got Garan, a good click-up player, is not in the best of form. I mean, Cilic, you wouldn't say it's not an ideal service for him. So Norrie was somehow had a pretty good run in Madrid and Barcelona. So I think he's got a good chance of coming through a few rounds there. But probably Zverev, I think, is the player he's most likely to get through there with a solid Madrid under his belt.
So looking at the semi-finals, then I think you had Djokovic and you had Nadal to come through Casper Ruud, didn't you? So did you have a Djokovic-Nadal semi-final here?
I do, yeah. So I'm looking forward to this one. Hopefully, if it does happen, we came close to it in Madrid, but I'm not too disappointed after the Alcaraz Djokovic match we got instead. So, but I think this time there's a good chance of it happening, and I'll go with Nadal to win here. Match I would really look forward to, but they have played in the 2021 final and the 2019 fairly recently. They've played loads of times in Rome as well before that, but Nadal winning those last two, I'd go with Nadal to get that one. Obviously, amazing record in Rome, and I think, just so strong usually in Rome in the last few years. So I'd go with Nadal to get through the final there.
And as bottom half, you had Tsitsipas to come through that section and Zverev to come through section 4, didn't you? So Tsitsipas Zverev for, is it the third time in recent weeks on clay? That'll be see it falling this time.
That'll be the third time at all the Masters 1000. So I'll go Tsitsipas just to edge that mini series. I think the conditions, as I just touched on, a bit more similar to Monte Carlo. I think he's got a bit of a better chance against Zverev's serve, particularly on the slower courts without the altitude. So I'd back Tsitsipas to get through another Masters final there and meet Nadal. And just to take that one on now, I'll go with Nadal to beat Tsitsipas in the final, which I think would be a really interesting one. They played a great match in Barcelona last year. But I'm going to go with Nadal to get his first clay court title of the year.
I think I'll probably go Nadal as well, actually. Like you say, the great record in Rome. It's not like he has a particularly easy run. He's got to come through Djokovic in the semi, which, you'd like to avoid Djokovic in the semi-final if you can. But I would say Nadal's a favourite there. I'll bring up the women's singles draw right now so we can pick through that. We've got action on both tours this week, so that's fantastic. The second week running, obviously, because the WTA doesn't really get going on clay in the early weeks, does it? But then with Madrid and Rome, it properly gets going. So the women's draw, Świątek and Kontaveit were straight through to the second round. We haven't got many of the second round settled so far. Victoria Azarenka is already through, but there hasn't been much play other than that. We've got Raducanu versus Andreescu is that in this section. That could be a mouth-watering first round tie. So a lot to look forward to there, but one clear favourite
is I've got to go with Świątek to come through there, and I think his side of the little side of that section is pretty good. I mean, Azarenka obviously capable, but clay not her best surface. I mean, that bottom section is really difficult to call with you've got Raducanu and Andreescu, Sorribes, Tormo in there. He's pretty dangerous on clay. Maric has got through that one, and then Kontaveit you'd say would be the highest seed, but clay not quite as strong clay as hard courts. But I'd probably just back Kontaveit to get through that quarterfinal, but at least to Świątek.
And second section 2, I should say, Sabalenka straight through. Danielle Collins straight through. She's got a tie with Halep set up. Bencic is already into the second round. Kalinina already into the second round. And a few others still to play the first rounds. So who's the favourite in this section?
It's a tough one, but I think I'd go with Halep to get through the semis. I think the form she's in, fantastic results on clay, winning Rome before. I'll go with Halep through there. I mean, Collins and Bencic not necessarily making it easy, but I'll go with Halep. And from the top little section, that's a tough one because I mean Sabalenka has been out of form. I'll possibly go with. I mean, Pegula's in there, but it might be tough for her coming off the back of Madrid. So I probably will go with Sabalenka to get through the quarters, bounce back a bit, but lose from Halep. Although she did reach the final in Stuttgart, Sabalenka, but. I'll go with Halep to beat Sabalenka.
Into the bottom half of the draw, Garbine Muguruza. Difficult year mostly so far, but straight through to the second round, still on seeding. And then we've got Maria Sakkari straight through to the second round. Coco Gauff getting a win against Angelique Kerber there. That was a good first round tie. I imagine I didn't actually manage to get to watch that one. She's through to the second round. We've also in this section got that Camila Giorgi versus Tomljanovic match looks like it's ongoing. Was that suspended because of the end of play for the day? So out of the players in this section, there's a few names in there that could come through for me, but who do you see coming through?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Obviously Jabeur in there coming off the back of a great week, but yeah, it can be a tough one to go back to back Madrid and Rome in the slightly different conditions. So I think, as you mentioned, Muguruza not having the greatest run, but I might have a French Open champion. I think she's maybe due to have a good run here on the clay. But I'll go with Sakkari to beat Muguruza in the quarterfinals there. As you said, there's a lot of dangerous players in there. Goff, Jabeur, obviously, if she can back it up, I'll go with Sakkari because I think, I like her game for the clay. We haven't quite seen it yet, so I think she should be pretty fresh.
And then the final section, Karolina Pliskova straight through to the second round, Paula Badosa straight through to the second round, Leylah Fernandez with a first round win already through to the second round against Daria Kasatkina. Rybakina's in there as well. I was going to say Pavlyuchenkova, but she's already out. Helena Ostapenko as well. A few in there. Badosa, she's had some good results. Across the year, she's had some good results. I think she's had one good run on the clay so far, but otherwise has been quite underwhelming compared to what we think she might do. But do you see her coming through that?
Yeah, I'll go with Badosa actually to get through there. I think, as you mentioned, semi-finals in Stuttgart was her best result. Had a slightly disappointing Madrid, but she did have Halep in the second round, so that was a tough draw. So I would back Badosa probably to get through there. I do think she's definitely capable of having some big results on the clay, and probably as a quarterfinal opponent, that's a difficult section. Pliskova out of form, but good record in Rome. But I would actually maybe go with Teichmann there, who got the semi-finals in Madrid, to have another strong run. She's had some impressive results. And lose to Badosa in the quarters.
So in your semi-final from the bottom half, we'll stay with the bottom half actually. Paula Badosa versus Maria Sakkari, I believe it is. Who do you see coming through that one?
Yeah, I'll go with Badosa to come through that one to the final. I think that'll be a good match. Was the semi-finals in Indian Wells earlier in the year where Sakkari won that one, but yeah, I'll go with Badosa just to get through there.
And moving on to the top half, you had Simona Halep, didn't you, against Iga Świątek? So who comes through that one?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Świątek. I just can't really go against it. I really hope that'll be a really good match to see. I think to see Halep, a former French Open champion, as I mentioned in the final 2 times as well. If she's back to her best, taking on Świątek, that could be really interesting. But yeah, I've got to go with Świątek with the run she's on to get through that to the final and play Badosa.
So does she continue that win streak in the final? How many wins would that be, or do you see her finally falling?
Yeah, I'll go there to win it in the final, which I think would be 28. I don't know, on the 5 here, which means amazing run. And I think that would be the 5th tournament in a row. So yeah, I'll go there to beat Badosa in the final, which would be a really interesting one between the top 2 seeds. And as you mentioned before, I just can't really see her losing at the moment. Just the level she's producing, a lot of matches, not dropping sets, barely dropping games at times. So yeah, I'd go there to take a 28 match streak into the French Open, which would be very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really boring and agree with you again. So we've both got Nadal to win Rome on the ATP and Świątek to win in the WTA. And to be honest, very easy picks are. We've gone with the safe options there. But I think that brings an end to this podcast. It has been a long one. We have had a lot to cover. We will have a lot to cover after this as well. We might come back with a review of Rome. Or we might just integrate it into as French Open predictions. We're not sure yet, but we're definitely going to be with you with French Open predictions because it's the second slam of the year. And I think we're both buzzing for it. It is really getting close now. Only a little bit more action to go and then we're there. So looking forward to that one. And we look forward to being back. Thank you for listening and see you soon.